On Mother's Day, my eldest daughter sent me a gift. I thought it was her way of reconciling an apology for the mistakes she made years ago. But the moment I touched the box, my younger daughter grabbed my wrist tightly and whispered, "Mom, don't open it. Call the police." I didn't understand, but I called anyway. When the box was opened, what was inside shocked me so badly I could barely breathe. Thank you for being here with me. Drop a comment below and let me know what city or country you're watching from. It really helps build this community. Please remember certain elements have been enhanced for narrative impact. Any similarities to real individuals or settings are unintentional, but the themes shared here are meant to inspire thoughtful reflection. The box arrived just after 9 on a Sunday morning in May. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my daughter Sarah when I heard the delivery truck pull away. Through the window, I saw the cardboard parcel on my front porch, medium-sized, with my eldest daughter, Rebecca's return address, printed in the corner. My heart lifted. After 6 months of silence, maybe this was her way of reaching out. "Mom, wait." Sarah's voice was sharp as I moved toward the door. She was 32, a paralegal with sharp instincts, and something in her tone made me pause. She'd driven over that morning to spend the holiday with me the way she did every year since her father passed. I opened the door anyway. The box was lighter than I expected. Rebecca's name stared back at me from the label, and for a moment, I let myself hope. Then Sarah leaned closer, and her face went pale. "Mom, look." She pointed at the side of the box. 3 small holes had been punched through the cardboard. Air holes. "Maybe it's something fragile," I said, but my voice wavered. Sarah was already pulling out her phone. That's when we heard it, a faint scratching sound from inside. Not mechanical, something moving. "Step back," Sarah said, positioning herself between me and the box. "We're calling the police." "Sarah, that's ridiculous. After everything she's done, you think this is a gift?" She looked at me with exhaustion mixed with fear. I wanted to argue, but the scratching came again and my stomach turned. The 10 minutes we waited felt like hours. We stood in the hallway staring at that box. The scratching had stopped, but the silence was worse. When Officer Thomas Reeves arrived, he brought Stephen Martinez, a specialist from animal control. Reeves was a veteran cop in his mid-40s with graying temples and steady presence. Martinez carried thick gloves and a catch-pole. "Ma'am," Officer Reeves said, "your daughter reported a suspicious package. Has anyone else handled this?" "Just me," I said. "I brought it inside before I realized." "That's all right." He gestured for Martinez to approach the counter. "Let's see what we're dealing with." Martinez pulled on his gloves and examined the holes. He tilted his head, listening, then used a tool to peer inside. His jaw tightened. "It's not moving anymore," he said quietly. Officer Reeves helped him cut through the packing tape. The cardboard flaps opened and Martinez reached inside, lifting out crumpled newspaper. What came next made my breath catch. It wasn't alive, not anymore. The small body lay on shredded paper, stiff and gray, its tiny paws curled inward. A creature that had once been quick and afraid, now reduced to a message. But it was the note that made my knees buckle. A single sheet of printer paper folded once, typed in cold letters. "This is what happens to selfish mothers. Happy Mother's Day." The room tilted. I reached for the counter, but Sarah was already at my side, her arm around my shoulders. Officer Reeves picked up the note with a gloved hand, his expression hardening. He looked at me, then at Sarah. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "this isn't the first time, is it?" I couldn't speak. My throat had closed up. I shook my head. Sarah answered for me. "No," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "It's not the first time. My sister has been doing this for months." Officer Reeves pulled out a notebook. "I'm going to need the full story, everything that led up to this." I looked at the note, at the cruel words, at how far my own daughter had fallen. There was no avoiding it anymore. I was going to have to tell them everything. It had started 6 months ago, the day we buried my husband. The chapel was too small for the crowd. Robert had been well-liked, a hard-working insurance agent who'd spent 38 years building trust in our community. Colleagues, clients, neighbors, people I barely recognized filled every pew, their faces solemn under the October gray sky. I sat in the front row, numb. Sarah held my left hand. Rebecca sat to my right, her husband Daniel beside her, both dressed in black. My granddaughter Lily, 9 years old, leaned against her mother's shoulder. Ethan, 12, sat stiff and silent, staring at the closed casket. The eulogy spoke of Robert's kindness, his dedication, his love for family. I heard the words, but they felt distant, like they belonged to someone else's life. My husband of 38 years was gone. His heart had given out on a Tuesday morning while he was reading the newspaper. No warning, no goodbye. After the service, people returned to our house. The dining table overflowed with casseroles, pies, sympathy cards. Neighbors offered quiet condolences. Dorothy Patterson, who lived 2 doors down, squeezed my hand and promised to check in on me. Pastor David Williams said a prayer. The house hummed with murmured conversations and the clinking of dishes. By evening, the crowd had thinned. Sarah stayed to help clean up. Rebecca and Daniel lingered, though they'd barely spoken to anyone all afternoon. When the last guest left, Rebecca finally approached me. "Mom, we need to talk," she said, her voice low. She was 38, my eldest, with sharp features and an intensity that had grown harder over the years. "Somewhere private." Sarah glanced up from the kitchen sink. I saw the warning in her eyes, but I nodded. Rebecca led me into the hallway, Daniel following close behind. He was 40 tall and restless, always checking his phone. "This isn't easy for me either." Rebecca began folding her arms. "But we need to discuss Dad's life insurance." My chest tightened. "Rebecca, it's been one day. I know about the policy." She continued, cutting me off. $400,000. It came through, didn't it? I stared at her. How did she know the amount? Robert and I had kept our finances private. Even Sarah didn't know the details. "That's not your concern right now," I said quietly. "It is my concern." Her voice sharpened. "Daniel and I need $150,000. We're putting a deposit down on a house and we're in an emergency situation. If we don't act now, we lose it." Daniel stepped forward, his tone rehearsed. "Your husband Robert would have wanted you to help us, Helen. Family takes care of family. That's what he always said." The words felt like a script. I looked between them, searching for grief, for anything that resembled sorrow over losing Robert. All I saw was expectation. "I need time." I said, my voice barely steady. "I need time to grieve. This is too much right now." Rebecca's face went cold. The shift was immediate, like a mask falling away. "You're going to regret this, Mom. You really are." "Rebecca, family takes care of family," she repeated, her tone dark. "You'll remember that." She turned and walked toward the door, Daniel trailing behind her. They didn't say goodbye to Sarah. They didn't even glance back. The door closed and the house fell silent. Sarah appeared beside me, her face pale. "Mom, what just happened?" I couldn't answer. My hands were shaking. Rebecca's words echoed in my head. "You're going to regret this." I told myself I was imagining things. She was grieving too, in her own way. People said things they didn't mean when they were upset, but deep down I knew better. Rebecca didn't make empty promises. 2 weeks later, I walked into the church fellowship hall, hoping to find some measure of peace. The Sunday service had ended, and the usual crowd gathered around tables laden with coffee and donuts. Familiar faces greeted me with gentle smiles, hands reaching out to touch my shoulder, voices offering quiet condolences. This was the community Robert and I had belonged to for over 20 years. I needed this. I needed to feel surrounded by people who cared. Dorothy Patterson waved me over to her table, and I was just sitting down when the side door opened. Rebecca walked in, Ethan and Lily trailing behind her. My grandson moved stiffly, his eyes fixed on the floor. Lily clutched her mother's hand, her small face uncertain. Rebecca scanned the room, and when her gaze landed on me, something in her expression shifted. She walked straight toward me, her heels clicking loudly against the tile floor. Conversations around us began to fade. "Mom," she said, her voice carrying across the room. 40 people, maybe more, turned to look. "I need to talk to you." I stood instinctively, trying to guide her somewhere private, but she didn't move. "I came here to ask you one more time," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear, her voice cracked. "I need help with the kids' medical expenses, just a small amount, but you've refused." My breath caught. Medical expenses. There were no medical expenses. "Rebecca, this isn't the place. Dad would have helped." Her eyes glistened with tears, perfectly timed. He always put family first. He would have made sure his grandchildren were taken care of. Ethan's face flushed red. Lily looked down at her shoes. They knew. I could see it in the way they stood stiff, uncomfortable, ashamed. They knew their mother was lying. Around us, the room had gone completely silent. I saw Dorothy's confusion, Pastor Williams, stepping forward from near the coffee station, concern etched on his face. "Rebecca, please," I said quietly, my voice shaking. "There are no medical bills, you know that. So now I'm a liar." Her voice rose indignant. "In front of everyone, you're calling me a liar." I couldn't speak. If I defended myself, it would only make the scene worse. If I said nothing, people would believe her. There was no way out. Pastor Williams reached us, his hand raised in a calming gesture. "Ladies, perhaps we should step into my office and discuss this privately." "There's nothing to discuss," Rebecca said, wiping at her eyes. "I came here hoping the church community could help me understand why my own mother would turn her back on her grandchildren, but I see now that I was wrong to come." She turned, taking Ethan and Lily by the hands, and walked out. The door swung shut behind them, and the silence that followed was suffocating. I felt every pair of eyes on me. Some looked sympathetic, others looked unsure. A few too many looked like they believed her. Pastor Williams touched my arm gently. "Helen, I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding," I whispered. My legs felt weak. "She's lying. There are no medical bills." He nodded slowly, but I could see the doubt in his face. He wanted to believe me, but Rebecca's performance had been convincing. I left shortly after. I couldn't stay. I couldn't bear the whispers, the sidelong glances, the way people who had known me for decades now looked at me with uncertainty. By the time I got home, my phone was lighting up with messages. One from a church member I barely knew. "I'd be happy to contribute to your granddaughter's medical fund if you'd like to set one up." Another, "I'm praying for your family during this difficult time. Please let Rebecca know we're here for her." A third, "I'm sure you have your reasons, Helen, but family should come first." I sat on my couch staring at the screen, my hands trembling. There was no medical fund. There were no bills. There never had been. But Rebecca had planted the seed, and it was already growing. My reputation built over 20 years in this community had been damaged in a matter of minutes. And the worst part was I knew some of them believed her. I knew because I could see it in their messages. They thought I was the one who'd turned my back on family. I couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet, and my mind wouldn't stop replaying the scene at church. Rebecca's tears, the stares, the messages lighting up my phone. So I did what I always did when I needed to understand something. I went to the numbers. Robert's home office still smelled faintly of his cologne. I sat at his desk, pulling out bank statements and checkbooks, laying them across the surface in chronological order. The overhead light hummed softly as I began to trace backward through the years. What I found made my chest tighten. $85,000. Maybe more. Spread across 6, maybe 7 years. I'd known we'd helped Rebecca, of course we had, but seeing it all laid out like this in black and white was different. The wedding 7 years ago, $18,000 for the venue, the dress, the flowers. Rebecca had promised to pay us back. She never did. Credit card payments, $17,000 total, broken across a dozen transactions. Each time she'd sworn it was the last time that she'd learned her lesson. A car down payment, $5,000. The car was repossessed 8 months later. $12,000 to cover what Daniel owed after a bad weekend, his problem, as Rebecca had called it. That was 4 years ago. We'd been told he'd stopped. Rent payments over $20,000, spanning the months when Rebecca was between jobs. Those months had stretched into a year. Emergencies, always emergencies. Another $5,000 scattered across a dozen smaller crises. I sat back staring at the columns of numbers. A pattern emerged clear as day. Crisis followed by a brief stretch of peace, followed by a new crisis. Over and over, a cycle that never broke, and we'd fed it, every single time. A memory surfaced sharp and unwelcome. Robert, a year before, his heart gave out sitting in this same chair. We just sent Rebecca another check, $3,000 to cover unexpected expenses. I'd felt good about it, proud even. We were helping our daughter. But Robert hadn't looked proud. He'd looked tired. "We're not helping her," he'd said quietly. We're teaching her that we'll always rescue her. I'd bristled. She's our daughter. What are we supposed to do? Let her lose everything? There's a difference between helping and enabling, he'd said, meeting my eyes. We're enabling her Helen, and one day it's going to cost us more than money. I'd dismissed him. I'd told him he was being too harsh, that family took care of family. He'd let it drop, but I could see the worry in his face. Sarah had said something similar years earlier. She'd tried to talk to us after the third or fourth bailout, warning us that Rebecca would never learn if we kept stepping in. Robert and I had both brushed her off. We'd thought we knew better. Now, sitting alone in the silent office, I realized the truth. I hadn't just given Rebecca money. I'd taught her that money solved everything. The consequences could always be avoided if she pushed hard enough. That her father and I would always cave, no matter how many times she came back. I'd shaped this. Not alone Robert had been part of it too, but I'd played my role. We both had. And when Robert finally saw it clearly when he'd tried to change course, I'd stopped him. I'd insisted we keep helping. I'd overruled him. If we'd stopped sooner, if I'd listened to him or to Sarah, would Rebecca be different now? Or had we already gone too far by then? I didn't know. But sitting there, surrounded by years of evidence, I couldn't escape the weight of my own responsibility. Robert had tried to warn me. Sarah had tried to warn me. I hadn't listened to either of them. And now I was paying the price. 4 weeks after the church incident, my phone rang while I was folding laundry. The caller ID showed my bank's number. "Mrs. Parker, this is Linda Garcia from the accounts department," the woman said. She was professional, but careful the kind of tone people used when delivering bad news. "I'm calling about some recent activity on your checking account. 3 large checks were processed in the past week, totaling $8,500, all made out to Rebecca Parker Thornton." I wanted to confirm these were authorized. My hands went still. $8,500! "Yes, ma'am. 3 checks, $3,000, and $2,500. They cleared 2 days ago." "I didn't write those checks." There was a pause. "I see. In that case, Mrs. Parker, we need to file a report immediately. This is unauthorized activity." I set the laundry basket down and walked straight to Robert's office. My checkbook sat in the top drawer where it always was. I flipped it open, my heart pounding. 3 checks were missing. The stubs were torn cleanly, deliberately, leaving just enough to show the sequence numbers. Rebecca had taken them. But when? I closed my eyes, forcing myself to think. 2 weeks ago. She'd come to the house mid-November, a Tuesday. She'd stood on my doorstep with tears in her eyes, saying she was sorry for what happened at church, that she'd overreacted, that she wanted to make things right. I'd let her in. I'd made her tea. We'd sat at the kitchen table, and she'd seemed so sincere. "Can I use the restroom?" she'd asked. I'd nodded, and she disappeared down the hallway. When she came back, she'd lingered near Robert's office door. "I was just looking at Dad's picture on the desk," she'd said softly. "I miss him so much." It had seemed innocent. A grieving daughter remembering her father. But she'd been in that office long enough to open the drawer, long enough to tear out 3 checks. I called her immediately. "Mom, what's wrong?" Her voice was light, almost cheerful. "You took checks from my office," I said, my voice shaking. $8,500, Rebecca. The bank just called." A pause. Then, "You owe me that money. Dad would have given it to me. You know he would." "I didn't write those checks." "You probably did and forgot," she said smoothly. "You've been confused since Dad passed. It's understandable. Grief does that." The words hit like a slap. "I am not confused. Mom, I'm worried about you. Maybe you should talk to someone. This kind of memory loss." I hung up. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial again. This time I called the police. Officer Thomas Reeves met me at the station an hour later. He was the same cop who'd responded to the package on Mother's Day, though that felt like a lifetime ago now. He listened carefully as I explained what had happened, took notes, asked for copies of my bank statements and the checkbook. "This is unauthorized use of your account, Mrs. Parker," he said. "Family or not, this is a crime." I nodded, but my throat was tight. "What about my grandchildren? If I press charges, she'll never let me see them again." Officer Reeves looked at me steadily. "That's a decision only you can make. But I'll tell you this, people who do this once usually do it again." I sat there frozen. My phone buzzed. Sarah. "Mom, you have to follow through." she said when I answered. "If you don't, she'll know she can get away with anything." I wanted to agree. I wanted to be strong. But then Rebecca called. "If you move forward with this," she said, her voice cold, "you'll never see Ethan or Lily again. Never. Is that really what you want?" I thought of my grandchildren. Ethan's quiet smile, Lily's laugh. The idea of losing them was unbearable. 2 hours later, I walked back into the station and told Officer Reeves I was withdrawing the complaint. He didn't argue, but the disappointment in his face was clear. "This is a mistake, Mrs. Parker. She's going to do this again." "I know," I whispered. But I signed the paperwork anyway. On the drive home, Sarah's words echoed in my head. "It's only going to get worse." I gripped the steering wheel tighter, trying to convince myself I'd made the right choice. But deep down, I knew I hadn't. A week later, Sarah showed up at my door unannounced. It was mid-December, the kind of cold afternoon that made the house feel too quiet. She carried a folder under her arm, her expression serious. "Mom, we need to talk," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. I followed her into the kitchen where she set the folder on the table and sat down. "I hired a private investigator," she said. "I paid for it myself." I stared at her. "Sarah, that's extreme. Rebecca is your sister." "She's mistreating you," Sarah said, her voice calm but firm. "And I needed to know why she's so desperate. Because this isn't just about money, Mom. It's something else." She opened the folder and slid it across the table. The top page read, "Confidential Report. Michael Cooper, Licensed Investigator." "Read it," Sarah said quietly. I pulled the folder closer, my hands unsteady. Sarah sat across from me, watching as I began to turn the pages. Daniel Thornton owed $180,000. The number jumped off the page. I had to read it twice to believe it. Not to a bank, not to a credit card company, to dangerous people, the kind who didn't care about payment plans or excuses, the kind who made their expectations clear. The investigator had included copies of text messages retrieved. Somehow, I didn't ask how. My eyes scanned them and my stomach turned. From Daniel to Rebecca, "Just take the money. I don't care how. They're going to hurt me badly if I don't pay." From Rebecca to Daniel, "I'm trying. She's being so selfish. I'll find another way." Another message dated a week earlier. "We have 2 months. That's it. February, and then they're done waiting." I set the papers down my chest tight. 2 months. The deadline was February. "So this is why," I said, my voice barely audible. "This is why she's been so desperate." Sarah nodded. "Daniel has a problem, a bad one. And instead of asking you for help honestly, Rebecca chose to manipulate you. She could have told you the truth, Mom. She could have explained. But she didn't." I looked at the messages again. "She's being so selfish." The words stung even now. I wasn't being selfish. I was grieving my husband, trying to hold my life together. But to Rebecca, I was an obstacle. "How much did this cost?" I asked, gesturing to the report. Sarah hesitated. $8,000. My breath caught. "Sarah, I needed to know," she said firmly. "And you deserved to know. This isn't just about Rebecca being difficult. This is about her putting you in danger because she won't face reality." $8,000. For a paralegal in her early 30s, that was a significant chunk of savings, maybe more than she could easily afford. And she'd spent it without asking me, without expecting anything in return. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Thank you," I whispered. She squeezed back but didn't smile. "Mom, look at the last message." I turned to the final page. Another text from Rebecca to Daniel dated just 2 days ago. "I'll find another way. Don't worry." Another way. Not "I'll ask her again," not "I'll be honest with her." Another way. "She's planning something," Sarah said quietly. "I don't know what, but she's not done." I sat back in my chair, staring at the folder. Part of me understood now. Rebecca wasn't just greedy or cruel. She was terrified. Daniel had put them in an impossible situation, and she was scrambling to fix it. But understanding didn't excuse it. It didn't justify the lies, the manipulation, the public humiliation. She could have come to me. She could have told me the truth. Instead, she'd chosen to weaponize my grief. "What do we do?" I asked. Sarah's jaw tightened. "We protect you. Whatever she's planning, we stop it before it gets worse." I nodded, but the weight of those words settled over me like a heavy blanket. Rebecca wasn't done. And whatever came next, I had a feeling it would be worse than anything she'd done so far, because the clock was ticking. February was only 2 months away, and Rebecca had already proven she'd do whatever it took. I arrived at the coffee shop 20 minutes early. It was a small place, neutral territory, somewhere neither of us had been before. I chose a table near the back and ordered a tea I didn't drink. My hands trembled as I waited. A few days had passed since Sarah showed me the investigator's report. I kept thinking about those text messages about Rebecca's desperation about the dangerous people waiting for their money. And I kept thinking, maybe if I offered to help her, really help her, she'd finally be honest with me. Rebecca walked in 10 minutes late. She spotted me immediately, and I saw the suspicion flicker across her face. She sat down, her purse clutched tightly in her lap. "What's this about?" she asked. I took a breath. "I want to help you, but I need you to be honest with me." Her eyes narrowed. "Honest about what?" "I know about Daniel's situation," I said quietly. Her face went through 3 expressions in quick succession: shock, panic, and then anger. "Who told you? Did Sarah have me followed?" I reached across the table, placing my hand over hers. She didn't pull away, not yet. That doesn't matter. What matters is that if you tell me the truth right now, we can figure this out together. For a moment, something in her expression cracked. Her eyes shimmered. Her jaw loosened. She looked so much like the little girl I used to know, the one who'd climb into my lap when she was scared. "How much does Daniel owe?" I asked gently. She opened her mouth. I could see the words forming. She was so close. And then the walls went back up. She pulled her hand away. "There's nothing to tell," she said, her voice cold again. "Someone's lying to you to turn you against me." "I know the amount," I said carefully. "I know the deadline. This isn't a lie, Rebecca. This is real." She stood abruptly, grabbing her purse. She pulled a few bills from her wallet and threw them on the table. "You're being paranoid. Grief has made you suspicious of everyone. Rebecca, you know what the real truth is." Her voice rose sharp enough that a couple at the next table glanced over. "You've always loved Sarah more than me. Always. And this is just proof." The accusation stung, but I kept my voice steady. "I'm offering to help you. Right now. All you have to do is be honest." "Then give me the $150,000, she snapped. "Stop playing games. Stop making me jump through hoops. Just give it to me." "Not like this," I said quietly. "Not when there are lies between us." Her jaw tightened. "Then I guess we have nothing else to talk about." She turned and walked out. The bell above the door chimed softly as she left, and I sat there staring at the bills she'd thrown on the table. Too much for a coffee she never ordered. The tea in front of me had gone cold. I wrapped my hands around the cup anyway, trying to steady myself. She'd been so close. For just a moment, I'd seen the truth in her eyes. I'd seen the fear, the exhaustion, the desperation. She'd almost told me, but she couldn't do it. She couldn't admit she needed help. She couldn't admit she'd made mistakes. I thought about what Sarah had said. "She could have told you the truth, Mom," but she chose to lie. Sarah was right. Rebecca had a choice, and she'd made it. I pulled out my phone and stared at it for a long time, debating whether to call her to try one more time. But I knew it wouldn't matter. Rebecca didn't want my help. She wanted my money without conditions, without accountability, without honesty. I couldn't save someone who wouldn't be honest with me. I left the coffee shop and drove home in silence. When I got home, I sat in the driveway for a few minutes replaying that moment, the one where her walls almost came down. She'd chosen to walk away instead. And I realized I couldn't fix this. No matter how much I wanted to, no matter how much I loved her, I couldn't save her from herself. She'd rather ruin everything than tell the truth. The doorbell rang 3 days later, unexpected and insistent. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, Rebecca stood on the porch, tears streaming down her face. Ethan and Lily stood on either side of her, holding flowers and a handmade card. "Mom," Rebecca said, her voice breaking, "I'm so sorry." Lily held up the card, her smile bright. "We made this for you, Grandma." The front read in crayon, "We love you." Ethan stood silent, his gaze fixed somewhere past my shoulder. He didn't smile. "Can we come in?" Rebecca asked, wiping her eyes. I stepped aside, my heart twisting. Whatever anger I'd felt at the coffee shop melted at the sight of my grandchildren. We sat in the living room, Rebecca perched on the edge of the couch, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The other day at the coffee shop made me realize how badly I've been handling everything, she said. I've been so scared about Daniel's situation that I've been taking it out on you. And that's not fair. Lily climbed onto the couch beside me, leaning her head against my arm. Ethan sat stiffly in the chair across the room, his jaw tight. I started going to therapy, Rebecca continued. She reached into her purse and pulled out an appointment card printed neatly with a therapist's name and address. I had my first session 2 days ago. It's helping me see things more clearly. I took the card studying it. It looked professional, real. And you were right, she said, her voice trembling. Daniel does have an issue. I've been in denial about it for so long, but I can't ignore it anymore. You were right about everything. I felt my throat tighten. Rebecca, but I don't want your money, Mom, she said quickly. I just want my mom back. I miss you. The kids miss you. Lily nodded against my shoulder. We miss you, Grandma. I pulled Rebecca into a hug and she clung to me. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was real. Maybe she was finally turning a corner. Can I use the restroom? Rebecca asked, pulling back and wiping her eyes. And maybe get the kids some water? Of course, I said. You know where everything is. She disappeared down the hallway and I stayed in the living room with Ethan and Lily. Lily chattered happily about school, about a new friend she'd made. Ethan said nothing. While Rebecca was out of sight, she moved quickly. In the bedroom, she opened my jewelry box and slipped the pearl necklace, the one Robert had given me on our 20th anniversary, into her pocket. The gold bracelet followed. 2 rings. In the hallway, she lifted the spare house key from the hook by the coat closet. In the office, she tore 3 blank checks from the checkbook in the desk drawer. All of it took less than 5 minutes. When she returned, she was carrying glasses of water, her expression serene. Here you go, sweetie, she said, handing one to Lily. Ethan looked at me, his mouth opening. Grandma, I don't think— Ethan, don't interrupt, Rebecca said sharply. He closed his mouth, but his eyes stayed on mine, worried. We sat together for another 20 minutes, drinking tea, talking about the upcoming holidays. Rebecca was warm, attentive, apologetic. She asked about my plans for Christmas. She promised to bring the kids over soon. My phone buzzed. Sarah. I glanced at the screen, then silenced it. That's Sarah, isn't it? Rebecca asked, her tone careful. Yes. She doesn't trust me, Rebecca said quietly. I understand why, but I hope in time she'll see I'm trying to change. I nodded. Sarah had texted earlier warning me that Rebecca's sudden turnaround felt too convenient. This doesn't feel right, Mom. But I'd brushed her off. Give your sister a chance. When they left, Rebecca hugged me tightly. Thank you for believing in me, she whispered. I watched from the porch as they climbed into the car. Lily waved enthusiastically. Ethan glanced back, his expression unreadable. As the car pulled away, I felt lighter than I had in months. My daughter was coming back to me. We were going to be okay. I didn't know yet what that reconciliation had cost me. 3 hours later, I was folding laundry in the bedroom, feeling lighter than I had in months. Rebecca was trying. She was getting help. We were going to be okay. I set a stack of towels on the dresser and reached for my jewelry box. It sat on the vanity where it always did, except tonight the lid was slightly open. I always closed it, always. I lifted the lid fully, my hands suddenly unsteady. The pearl necklace was gone. The one Robert's mother had given me on our wedding day passed down through 3 generations. Irreplaceable. The gold bracelet, Robert's gift for our 30th anniversary, engraved with our initials, was gone too. 2 rings, both missing. I stared at the empty velvet slots, my mind struggling to catch up. Maybe I'd moved them. Maybe I'd put them somewhere else and forgotten. But I knew I hadn't. I bolted into the hallway. The spare key, the one I kept on the hook by the coat closet, was gone. My chest tightened. I ran to the office. The checkbook sat in the top drawer exactly where it should be. I flipped it open. 3 checks were missing, torn cleanly from a different section than the ones she'd taken before. The pieces fell into place, sharp and brutal. Can I use the restroom? The bedroom. Let me get the kids some water. The hallway, the office. The entire apology had been a setup, a performance designed to get her into my house unsupervised with access to everything. My knees gave out. I sank to the floor, my back against the desk, unable to breathe. The air felt too thick, too heavy. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't hold them still. This was worse than the checks, worse than the church, because this time I'd opened my heart to her. I'd believed her. I'd let myself hope. And she'd used it to take what was left. I crawled to the bathroom and sat on the cold tile floor, tears streaming down my face. Not sad tears, angry ones. I pulled out my phone and called Sarah. My voice came out broken, barely recognizable. You were right. She took things. While she was apologizing to me, she was going through my house. What did she take? Sarah's voice was tight controlled. My jewelry, the spare key, more checks. There was a pause. Then, Mom, she has a key to your house. She can come back anytime she wants. The thought hit me like ice water. My home, the one place that was supposed to be safe, wasn't safe anymore. Pack a bag, Sarah said. Come stay with me tonight. No. My voice was firmer than I expected. I'm not running. This is my house. Then I'm staying with you, she said. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Tomorrow, first thing we're changing the locks. I hung up and looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. The woman staring back at me looked different. Not broken, not defeated, angry. For months I'd been reacting, trying to understand, trying to fix things, trying to be the mother who didn't give up on her child. But Rebecca didn't want a mother. She wanted a victim. I stood steadying myself against the sink. My reflection sharpened. You want to fight, Rebecca. I said aloud, my voice cold and clear. You just started one. Sarah arrived half an hour later with an overnight bag and a fierce determination in her eyes. She checked every lock, every window. She made sure the doors were bolted. She moved a chair under the handle of the front door just in case. We didn't talk much. There wasn't much to say. That night, I slept in my bedroom with the door locked from the inside. Sarah slept on the couch in the living room, her phone within reach. I didn't sleep well. Every creak, every sound made my heart race. But I didn't leave. Because this was my house, my life, and I wasn't giving it up. Not anymore. The next morning, Sarah and I didn't waste time. Monday, a locksmith named John Anderson arrived at 8 sharp. He changed every lock in the house front door, back door side entrance, even the garage. $450. I didn't hesitate. Tuesday, a security technician, Mark Johnson, installed a video doorbell and motion sensors around the perimeter. I watched him work, memorizing how the system functioned. If Rebecca came back, I'd know. Wednesday, Sarah and I sat at the kitchen table with bank statements, the investigator's report, a handwritten timeline, and photographs of the missing jewelry. We built a file, evidence, documentation, a paper trail that told the story clearly. Thursday, I called the number on Rebecca's therapy card. A receptionist answered. I'm looking for a patient, I said carefully. Rebecca Thornton. A pause. We don't have anyone by that name. Are you sure she showed me an appointment card? Ma'am, if we don't have a record, she's never been here. I hung up. The card had been false. Printed at home, probably. Another piece of the performance. Friday, Sarah looked at the file we'd assembled and said, when she tries again, we'll be ready. But Rebecca didn't try again. Not that week, not the next, not the one after that. Christmas came. I set up a small tree more out of habit than joy. Sarah spent the day with me. Rebecca didn't visit. It was the first Christmas in my daughter's life that she hadn't come home. New Year's passed quietly. The neighborhood lit fireworks. I watched from the window, checking the doorbell camera every few minutes. February arrived. Daniel's deadline, the one mentioned in those text messages, came and went. I didn't know what had happened. Had they paid? Had they borrowed from someone else? The silence felt heavier than any confrontation. Valentine's Day. My birthday. Both passed without a word from Rebecca. March brought rain. April brought early blooms. The winter cold gave way to spring warmth and still nothing. The silence wasn't peace. It was preparation. Sarah visited twice a month, always staying overnight. We checked the cameras together. We reviewed the file. We talked in low voices about what might come next. She's planning something, Sarah said one evening in late April. She's been quiet for too long. I knew she was right. Every day that passed without contact felt like a held breath. Like Rebecca was circling, waiting for the perfect moment. I started jumping at every doorbell ring, deliveries, neighbors, solicitors. I checked the camera feed, obsessively scrolling back through footage even when I knew nothing had happened. Mother's Day is in 2 weeks, Sarah said quietly one Saturday in early May. My stomach dropped, of course. The perfect occasion, the cruelest timing. The Saturday before Mother's Day, Sarah came over. We both felt it a dread neither of us could name. We checked every lock, every window, every camera angle. "Everything's working," she said, but her voice was tight. That night, I dreamed of Robert. He stood in the hallway of our old house, his face urgent, his mouth moving. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but I knew it was a warning. He kept pointing toward the front door, his expression pleading. I woke at 3 a.m, my heart pounding, and I couldn't fall back asleep. Sunday morning came. Mother's Day. I stood in the kitchen staring at the coffee maker, willing my hands to stop shaking. The house was locked. The cameras were on. The file was ready. Sarah was on speed dial. But none of it made me feel safe, because I knew deep in my bones that today was the day. Rebecca had been silent for 4.5 months, waiting, planning, choosing her moment. And she'd chosen this one. At 9 a.m, my phone buzzed with an alert from the doorbell camera. Sarah was in the kitchen making breakfast when I called out, "Someone's at the door." We both pulled up the live feed. A delivery driver set a medium-sized package on the porch, scanned it, and walked back to his truck. Sarah leaned over my shoulder. "Look at the return address." I zoomed in. Rebecca's name, her address, bold, unmistakable. "She used her real address," Sarah said. "She wanted you to know. I saw the holes, 3 of them punched cleanly through the cardboard." "Call 911, I said. My voice was steady. We'd been preparing for this. Officer Thomas Reeves arrived within 15 minutes. He recognized me immediately. "Mrs. Parker," he said. "We meet again. Still the same daughter?" "Yes," I said simply. He radioed for backup and called in a detective. "Given the history here, I think we need someone who can see the bigger picture." Detective James Morrison arrived 20 minutes later. He was in his late 40s, sharp-eyed, methodical. I explained the previous incidents, the church humiliation, the stolen checks, the jewelry, the spare key, the 4.5 months of silence. "This isn't isolated," he said. "This is a pattern." Stephen Martinez, the animal control specialist, arrived with protective gloves. Together, they carefully opened the package. Inside was the small, lifeless body of a creature stiff and gray. And beneath it, the note. "This is what happens to selfish mothers. Happy Mother's Day." Detective Morrison photographed everything. "Combined with the documented history, this qualifies as elder mistreatment," he said. "We have enough to move forward." At the station, Sarah and I gave statements. I handed Detective Morrison the file we'd built, bank records, the investigators' report timelines, photographs of the missing jewelry, copies of the stolen checks. He flipped through it, eyebrows raised. "This is perfectly documented. Most victims don't have a fraction of this." "We've been preparing," I said. He nodded. "Good, because this is going to move fast." The investigation began immediately. Detective Morrison reviewed the doorbell camera footage and traced the tracking number. The sender had paid with a prepaid card, but the origin address listed on the shipping form was Daniel's workplace. "They didn't think we'd check that," Morrison said. Mistake number 1. By late afternoon, he'd secured a court order to access Rebecca and Daniel's home. What they found was damning. A receipt from a specialty supplier for a small rodent purchased 3 days earlier. Text messages on Rebecca's phone. "This will teach her a lesson." Another, "Mother's Day surprise ready." The spare house key I'd reported stolen. My pearl necklace, my gold bracelet, 2 rings. Everything was there. Rebecca and Daniel were taken into custody that evening. Ethan and Lily were placed temporarily with Daniel's parents. I asked Detective Morrison to make sure they knew I wasn't upset with them. "They're children," he said. "None of this is their fault." He promised to pass the message along. As Rebecca was led out of her house in restraints, she saw me standing across the street with Sarah. For a moment, our eyes met. She smiled, not a warm smile, a cold, knowing one. Then she mouthed something. I couldn't hear her, but I could read her lips clearly. "You won't press charges. You'll feel sorry for me. You always do." Sarah saw it too. She grabbed my arm. "Mom, don't listen to her." But Rebecca's confidence was unshaken. Even now, even with the evidence stacked against her, she believed I would fold, that I would choose mercy over justice, that I would protect her the way I always had. Detective Morrison approached. "Mrs. Parker, we have everything we need to file formal charges, But I need to know, are you willing to follow through? Because if you drop this, she'll do it again. I looked at Rebecca, still smiling that cold smile. I thought about the years of enabling. The $85,000, the stolen checks, the public humiliation, the jewelry Robert had given me, the 4.5 months of silence while she planned this final cruelty. I'm pressing charges, I said. Rebecca's smile faltered. For the first time in months, I saw fear in her eyes. If you're still here with me, comment "still here" so I know you're standing with me. And tell me honestly, if this were your child, would you press charges? Or forgive one more time? Because what I chose next changed everything. And a gentle note, the next part includes some dramatized elements for storytelling purposes. If this isn't for you, feel free to step away now. A few hours later, I stood behind a one-way mirror at the police station watching 2 screens side by side. On the left, Rebecca sat in an interrogation room, her hands folded neatly on the table. On the right, Daniel slumped in his chair, looking pale and defeated. Sarah stood beside me, her arms crossed. Neither of us spoke. Rebecca's interrogation. Detective Morrison entered her room and laid out the evidence, the receipt for the rodent, the text messages, the stolen jewelry, the spare key. Rebecca's reaction was immediate. Tears welled in her eyes. Her hands trembled. "Someone's framing me," she said, her voice breaking. "My mother. She's been different since my father passed. I've been so worried about her." Morrison didn't react. He slid a printed text message across the table. "This will teach her a lesson." Rebecca stared at it, then looked up with wide, innocent eyes. "I don't know how that got there. She forgets things now, then blames me. I've been worried about her mental state for months." "And the jewelry?" Morrison asked. "She gave those to me," Rebecca said firmly. "Years ago. She's confused now. She doesn't remember." "What about the documentation she's kept? Bank records, timelines, photographs?" Rebecca's expression shifted just for a second into something cold. Then the mask went back up. "That obsessive record keeping. That's not normal. It's proof she's not well." She was trying to flip the narrative. The concerned daughter dealing with a mother in decline. Daniel's interrogation. In the other room, Detective Morrison's partner brought up the debt. Daniel's face went white. "How much do you owe?" the detective asked. Daniel's composure shattered. "She said it would work. She said her mother always felt sorry for her, that we'd get the money and everything would be fine." "Who said that?" "Rebecca." His voice cracked. "It was her idea, the church thing, the checks, the package, all of it." "So you're saying your wife planned everything?" "Yes, she planned it all. I just went along with it." He buried his face in his hands. "I needed the money. The people I owe you don't understand. They don't wait." "Tell me about the Mother's Day package." Daniel looked up, his eyes red. "She ordered it. She said it would scare her mother into giving us the money. She said it was the perfect timing. Observation room." I watched both screens in silence. Sarah's hand found mine and squeezed. "She's still lying," Sarah said quietly, "even with all the evidence right in front of her." I nodded, my voice flat. "She believes her own lies. That's what scares me." Detective Morrison stepped into the observation room. "Your son-in-law just gave us everything. We have enough to charge them both." He paused, his gaze steady. "But I need to know, Mrs. Parker, are you going to follow through? Or are you going to drop the charges like you did with the checks?" I didn't answer right away. On the screen, Rebecca sat alone now, checking her reflection in the one-way mirror. She smoothed her hair, adjusted her expression, preparing for the next performance. Even alone, she was still acting. The silence stretched. Sarah squeezed my hand tighter. "I'm not dropping anything," I said finally. "File every charge you can." Morrison nodded, a hint of respect in his eyes. "Good. We'll move forward with the prosecution." Sarah turned to me, her eyes shining. "I'm proud of you, Mom." I looked back at the screen. Rebecca was still adjusting her face in the mirror, smoothing away any trace of worry, rebuilding the mask she'd worn for so long. But this time, it wouldn't save her. 2 weeks later, I walked into the courtroom. The space felt formal, heavy with consequence. My attorney, Margaret Summers, sat beside me, a woman in her 50s who specialized in elder mistreatment cases. Across the aisle, Rebecca sat with her public defender, Brian Foster, her expression carefully neutral. Judge Patricia Harrison, a woman in her mid-50s with sharp eyes and no-nonsense demeanor, presided from the bench. She reviewed the petition in silence, then looked up. "We're here to consider a restraining order based on allegations of elder mistreatment, harassment, and theft," she said. "Ms. Summers, proceed." Attorney Summers laid out the timeline methodically. 6 years of manipulation. The escalation after Robert's passing. The church. Humiliation. The stolen checks. The jewelry. The spare key. The Mother's Day package. She presented photographs, statements, text messages. The evidence was overwhelming. Rebecca's testimony. When Rebecca took the stand, her strategy shifted. No defiance, no anger, just a heartbroken daughter pleading for mercy. "I love my mother," she said, her voice trembling. "I made mistakes because I was desperate. My husband and I were in a terrible situation, and I didn't know what else to do." She wiped at her eyes. "I'm not asking to avoid consequences. I'm asking for help instead of punishment. I want my family back together. I want to make things right." She turned to me directly. "Mom, please. Think about Ethan and Lily. They need their grandmother." The courtroom was silent. When it was my turn, I kept my voice steady. Attorney Summers asked, "Why are you seeking protection now?" "Because I realize that love doesn't mean accepting mistreatment," I said. "It means having boundaries. I tried honesty. I offered to help her if she would just be truthful. She chose lies every time." I looked at the judge. "I want her to get real help, but I can't let her back into my life until she's truly accountable." Sarah presented the investigators' findings, the timeline of Daniel's debt, the texts between Rebecca and Daniel. Then she read aloud from Rebecca's phone. "Mom always feels sorry for me if I cry. Use the kids. She's so weak." Sarah's voice was calm but firm. "My sister doesn't regret what she did. She only regrets getting caught." Rebecca shot to her feet. "You always loved Sarah more than me, always." Judge Harrison's gaze hardened. "Control yourself or I'll hold you in contempt." Rebecca turned to me, her face twisted with rage. "Dad would be ashamed of you." The words were meant to cut. But I'd been preparing for this. "Your father wrote a letter before he passed," I said quietly, "to warn me about you." I handed the letter to Attorney Summers, who passed it to the judge. Judge Harrison read it aloud. Robert's words filled the courtroom, his concerns about Rebecca's manipulation, his regret for enabling her, his plea for me to protect myself. Rebecca's face went white. She hadn't known the letter existed. Judge Harrison set the letter down and looked directly at Rebecca. "This is a textbook case of financial elder mistreatment," she said. "The pattern is clear. The evidence is overwhelming. You exploited your mother's grief for personal gain." She paused. "You are fortunate that she hasn't pursued additional criminal charges beyond what the state is already prosecuting." She turned to me. "Mrs. Parker, I'm granting a restraining order for 5 years. Ms. Thornton is prohibited from any contact, direct or indirect, within 500 feet of you, your home, or your property. Any violation will result in immediate penalties." She looked back at Rebecca. "Separate criminal charges will proceed independently. Consider yourself lucky." In the hallway outside, Rebecca stopped near the exit. She looked at me one last time. "You've destroyed this family," she said. "Ethan and Lily will hate you for this." I met her gaze. "They'll understand when they're older. I hope you will too." "This isn't over," she said. "Yes," I said quietly, "it is." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the tile floor. I watched her go, feeling the weight of everything we'd lost. But I also felt something I hadn't felt in years, peace. Sarah put her arm around me. "One more thing left, Mom." I nodded. One more piece of unfinished business. 3 days later, I sat in the office of Charles Roberts, the estate attorney who'd handled Robert's will 15 years ago. Sarah sat beside me. "I want to change my will," I said. "I want to remove Rebecca entirely." Charles nodded slowly, making notes. "What about your grandchildren?" "That's what I'm here to figure out." He set down his pen. "If you're concerned about their future, we can create an irrevocable educational trust. It's funded now, but untouchable until they reach college age. Rebecca would have no access, no control, and no ability to contest it." How much, I asked. "Whatever you feel is appropriate." I thought for a moment. $150,000. Sarah glanced at me. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. It was the exact amount Rebecca had demanded. The trust will cover tuition books housing anything education-related, Charles explained. An independent trustee will manage it. Rebecca can't touch it, can't redirect it, can't use it for anything else. Good, I said. And I want to write letters to Ethan and Lily to be opened when they turn 18. I want them to understand why I had to set boundaries and that I love them even when I couldn't be in their lives. Charles made a note. Done. Now for the rest of the estate, 80% to Sarah, 20% to organizations that work to protect seniors from mistreatment. And Rebecca, $1, I said. Symbolic. So she can't claim she was accidentally left out and contest the will. Charles nodded. That's standard practice in these situations. He pulled out a document and began filling in the changes. Then he paused, glancing at Sarah. Ms. Parker, while we're discussing finances, I should mention there's been a withdrawal from your retirement account recently. I assume you're aware. Sarah's face went still. I turned to her. What withdrawal? She didn't answer right away. Sarah, I said. What withdrawal? She took a breath. I used my house savings. All of it. $50,000. The air left my lungs. Your house fund, Sarah, that was for your first home. I know what it was for, she said quietly. Charles, sensing the moment, slid a printed breakdown across the table. I stared at the numbers. Private investigator, $8,000. Attorney fees, $7,500. Security system, $3,200. Locksmith, $450. Emergency fund for me, $10,000. Living expenses while taking time off work, $15. 000 plus. Miscellaneous costs, $5,850. Total $50,000. You spent everything, I whispered. You're my mother, Sarah said. You needed protection. Houses can wait. I couldn't speak. My throat was too tight. Charles, I said finally, my voice shaking, add an immediate gift to Sarah. $75,000 from the life insurance funds, enough for a down payment and then some. Mom, no, you protected me, I said, turning to her. Now I'm protecting your future. I don't need... I'm not asking, I said firmly. You gave up your dream to keep me safe. I'm making sure you get it back. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She nodded, unable to speak. Charles made the addition. I'll have the documents ready for signature by the end of the week. That evening, Sarah and I sat on my porch as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. I failed one daughter, I said quietly, but I succeeded with you. You didn't fail her mom, Sarah said. She made her own choices. I should have set boundaries years ago. Maybe, Sarah said, but you did it when it mattered most. I reached for her hand. Your father would be so proud of you. He'd be proud of you too, she said. You found your strength. We sat in silence, watching the light fade. For the first time in years, I felt whole. My family wasn't defined by blood anymore. It was defined by loyalty, by love, by the people who stayed when things got hard. And Sarah had stayed. 3 months later, I stood on the porch of a small rental house near the ocean, watching the sun rise over the water. The air smelled of salt and possibility. I'd moved here 6 weeks ago, an hour away from the old town, close enough to stay connected, but far enough to start fresh. The house was modest, 2 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, and a view that made every morning feel like a gift. My new routine was simple. Beach walks at dawn, coffee on the porch, journaling. Twice a week, I volunteered at the local senior center, teaching financial literacy and helping others recognize the warning signs of mistreatment. I'd lived it. Now I could help others avoid it. For the first time in years, I had purpose beyond survival. Sarah had bought a house 20 minutes away using the $75,000 I'd given her. She visited twice a week, and we'd built something I hadn't known was possible: healthy boundaries. We loved each other, but we didn't need to be everything to each other. It was enough. She'd also started advocacy work, helping other families navigate situations like ours. One morning, an email appeared in my inbox. The sender, a generic school library account. Dear Grandma, I don't understand everything that happened, but I found some of Dad's papers about what he owed. Mom says we're not allowed to talk to you, but I wanted you to know I don't hate you. I hope when I'm 18, maybe we can talk. I miss you. Ethan. I read it 3 times, tears streaming down my face. He was nearly 13 now. 5 more years. I wrote back carefully, keeping it short. I love you. When you're 18, find me. I had hope for my grandchildren. Not for Rebecca, but for them. A week later, I ran into Dorothy Patterson at a coffee shop. She approached hesitantly. "Helen, I owe you an apology," she said. "I believed Rebecca that day at church. Later, I heard the truth. I'm so sorry." I nodded. "Thank you." She told me the church had started a program in Roberts in my name, the Robert and Helen Parker Senior Protection Fund. "Tell them I appreciate it," I said. But I needed a fresh start. She understood. Sarah came by that afternoon with news. "Rebecca took a plea deal," she said. 2 years probation mandatory counseling, and she has to pay you back $12,000 in restitution. And Daniel, the debt caught up with him. He filed for bankruptcy. Their marriage is hanging by a thread. I think they're headed for separation. I sat with that for a moment. "I hope the counseling helps her," I said, "but she's not my responsibility anymore." Sarah squeezed my hand. "No, she's not." That evening, I walked the beach at sunset. The sky blazed gold and orange, the waves steady and endless. I thought about the journey I'd taken widow, victim, survivor, teacher. I thought about Robert. He tried to warn me. I finally listened. I'd spent so long believing my grief had made me weak, but the strength had always been there. I just needed the right reason to use it. Love and boundaries weren't opposites. They were partners. I still felt sadness when I thought of Rebecca, but I didn't feel guilt anymore. I'd given her every chance. She'd chosen her path. I'd chosen mine. People asked me sometimes if I regretted cutting her off. I told them I didn't cut her off. I set her free. Free from the expectation that I would always rescue her. And I set myself free. From guilt, from manipulation, from fear. That night, Sarah came for dinner. We cooked together, laughed, talked about nothing important. It felt easy, natural. "How are you doing, Mom? Really?" I smiled. "I'm okay. Really, truly okay." "Dad would be proud," she said. "He'd be proud of you, too." We ate on the porch, watching the waves roll in. The evening air was warm, the stars beginning to appear. "This is what family should feel like," I said. "Safe, peaceful, chosen." Sarah nodded. "Yeah, it is." That night I slept with the windows open, the ocean breeze drifting through the room. No locks on the bedroom door, no fear about tomorrow. Just peace, hard-won, carefully guarded, and absolutely priceless. Rebecca had sent a package meant to terrify me. Instead, it had given me the final push I needed to save myself. And for that, in a strange way, I was grateful. Looking back on everything that happened, I see now how easily love can be mistaken for weakness, and how boundaries can be confused with cruelty. For years, I believed that being a good mother meant saying yes, even when it hurt me. I thought sacrifice without limits was the ultimate expression of love. I was wrong. Don't be like me. Don't wait until you're drowning to ask for help. Don't let guilt become a weapon someone else uses against you. And don't confuse enabling with love. They are not the same thing. This is one of those family drama stories that I never imagined I'd be living, let alone sharing. But if my experience can help even one person recognize the warning signs, then perhaps it was worth it. These kinds of grandma stories aren't always about warm cookies and bedtime tales. Sometimes they're about survival, about learning when to hold on and when to let go. The hardest lesson I learned, love and boundaries, are not opposites. They're partners. You can love someone deeply and still refuse to be their lifeline when they're determined to sink. You can honor the relationship you once had while accepting that the person has chosen a path you cannot follow. My faith taught me that God gives us strength in our darkest moments, and I found mine when I finally stopped trying to save someone who didn't want to be saved. There's a difference between compassion and self-destruction. Choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. If you're reading this and recognizing pieces of your own family drama stories in mine, please hear me. You are not responsible for fixing someone who refuses to change. You are not required to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm, and you are not a bad person for protecting your peace. These grandma stories we carry, whether we're the grandmothers, the daughters, the sons, they shape us, but they don't have to define us. We get to choose how the story ends. I chose peace. I chose boundaries. And I chose to believe that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away. To anyone caught in a similar situation, document everything. Build your support system. Don't be afraid to seek legal protection. And most importantly, remember that you deserve safety, respect, and peace even from family. I've heard countless family drama stories over the years, but living through one yourself changes everything. And grandma stories like mine remind us that family isn't always defined by blood. It's defined by loyalty, by respect, by love that doesn't demand your destruction as proof of its existence. I hope my story gives you permission to choose yourself, because at the end of the day, you can't pour from an empty cup and you shouldn't have to. Thank you for walking with me through this entire journey. I'd love to hear your perspective. What would you do if you found yourself in my shoes, caught between love and self-preservation? Please leave a comment below, sharing your thoughts. If this story resonated with you or made you think differently about boundaries and family, I'll be grateful if you subscribe to my channel so you won't miss the stories I share next. A gentle reminder from me. While I drew inspiration from real-life family conflicts and the challenges many of us face with elder mistreatment, I dramatized certain elements for storytelling purposes. If this content isn't what you're looking for, feel free to explore other videos that might speak to you more.